Scholars push Africans to challenge UN systems with the spirit of Pan-Africanism. And the diaspora urges compatriots and government to stand together at such critical time. Greetings everyone and a very warm welcome to this news hour. With the news, I'm Shifarao and do stay with us. Now, Ethiopia will ensure inclusivity of all agendas at stake, including controversial constitutional elements to be discussed in a planned national dialogue to put forth a lasting solution to the internal conflict. On the sidelines of the Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit, Redwan Hussein told the Anadolu agency that Ethiopia is moving forward to give broadened political space through a planned dialogue. Ethiopia vows to table all agendas, including referendum, in the national dialogue. There are controversies in the Ethiopian constitution that are long urged to be debated nationwide. Redwan said the dialogue is open for any reasonable discussion, which might be culminated as far as the referendum. Now, Africa is still fettered with enormous political, economic and social problems embroiled by external and internal factors. Western powers have also been trying to put their thought of neo-colonialism against Africa. That's why many political scientists and historians say Africa needs to get back to its Pan-Africanism ideology to resist all-rounded pressures of the West. Jerusalem Batsia has produced the following report.
The seed of Pan-Africanism was sown at the humiliating defeat of the European military power, Italy, at the Battle of Adwa in March 1896 under the leadership of Emperor Melik II of Ethiopia. Many historians also agree that Adwa was not simply defeating Italy, that it was against Western imperialism and a victory of racism at large.
One way or the other, the victory of Adwa was a victory over racism. It was a victory over European philosophy of men are not created equal and their own race is superior. So absolutely, when we think of the victory of Adwa, I agree to the point that Adwa is not a victory over colonialist military forces, and it was not simply a military victory, and rather it is a victory of equality over inequality, a victory over racism.
The Battle of Adwa and Pan-Africanism are inextricably and inseparably linked as two sides of a coin cemented by human motives and sacrifice for love of freedom and independence, as historians said.
Political independence does not mean economic independence. So that's why you see a Pan-African movement and then establishing an African organization, an umbrella organization, was a necessity. And secondly, to help those countries that are still under colonial occupation by the 1960s. So for that reason, you see, Pan-African movement was mandatory by then, and Ethiopia's reference of playing a leading role in that movement emanates from Adwa. And others respected Ethiopia's involvement and leadership because of references like Adwa.
However, many are criticizing the Pan-Africanism movement is equated for a long period of time due to various reasons. That's why Western powers are currently trying to put their pressure on Africa in many ways. But now, surprisingly, Africans have been trying to examine their potential to resist thoughts of Western neo-colonialism through stimulating Pan-Africanism movement for the benefits of the continent. Scholars said that the current African leaders, including Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, reviving the movement in reinstating corners of a continent of around 1.3 billion people to have a permanent voice and seat at the UN Security Council.
Why Africans insist and are convinced and say we need a seat in the Security Council? Because of this reason. Look, 1.3 billion people live in Africa now. Imagine. And it's the richest continent. Of course, most of the wealth of Africa is within the wombs of Mother Earth, but it's coming up. Nigeria, its economy, nobody knows. It's huge, it's in the trillion. The Nigerian economy is bigger than considerable number of European countries, believe it or not. Ethiopia is growing. South Africa is already a sort of a quasi-developed country. So the potential for Africa, Kenya and others in Ghana and Senegal, and all are growing. Algeria, by the way, in Morocco, in the Maghreb, in the north, they are also growing. So I think the debate is Africa deserves a seat, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who stands for not only Ethiopia's interests, but the interest of all Africans, he now more and more is underlining the fact that in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, he is raising this issue.
Today, the hashtag No More movement by the Ethiopians and friends in the diaspora across the world has sent a lighting message of Pan-Africanism. Indeed, Africa needs solidarity now more than any time to fight for political and economic independence for the continent, Jamaican-born Dr. Desta Megu said.
We have to think of ourselves as true Pan-Africans. And as true Pan-Africans, we have the ability to utilize the hospitality and the platform of Ethiopia as the diplomatic capital of the world to express what this means. You know, we'll be opening the Pan-African wing at the Institute of Ethiopian Studies at Addis Ababa University in a couple of weeks. It's the one space in this continent that looks at how Ethiopia is at the center of Pan-Africanism, from the Battle of Adwa to the No More campaign. Ethiopia is a central point. And right now, if we link arms together as Pan-Africans, we will protect not just Ethiopia, but the integrity of the entire continent.
That's why many are saying that Africa backs to the unfinished work, Pan-Africanism.
Well, dear viewers, let's now turn our attention to trending stories regarding Ethiopia in the past 24 hours. And as usual, I'm joined here in the studio by my colleague Binyam Alamayo, who will help us shed some light on the top stories that he observed in a stated period of time. And Binyam, welcome.
Thank you, Shafi.
Now, Debretsion Gebremichael has written a letter to the United Nations calling for, among other things, a no-fly zone over Tigray. What are the overall sense of the letter, and what new developments have you observed in the letter?
Okay, thank you, Shafi. So the invading Tigrayan army of TPLF was suffering heavy military defeats in both states of Afar and Amhara for the past 3 weeks. And incidentally, 6 prominent TPLF military generals were killed at the Kasagita front in the state of Afar. And the TPLF was losing one after the other its strong military strongholds or bases in both these states, whose objective was to cut supply lines to Djibouti and hold Ethiopia on a choke position. But unexpectedly, the Ethiopian army was advancing and the TPLF was losing big time. And so it was in this context that Debretsion Gebremichael, the leader of the fascistic or terrorist group TPLF, wrote a letter addressed to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. There's a whole lot of funny things about this letter. And in it, he says that there was call after call on the TPLF by the international community for a ceasefire. And it makes it look like they've been begged all the while for a ceasefire, while the reality on the ground is that the international community was actually abetting the TPLF to fortify its advance on the capital, Addis Ababa. But here it says there was a unanimous call on the TPLF for a withdrawal from areas outside of Tigray, so that the condition, fertile ground for ceasefire is created. So that's what it indicates here. And you know, on the other hand, a group which has been bragging about total military defeat of Ethiopia and its actual advent to Addis Ababa is singing like a bird about peace. And
they're also calling this ceasefire a sick joke, right?
Yes, that's what they've been saying. Who are we going to sit down and talk? That's what Sarkan Gabratinsai indicated a while ago, while Desi and Waldia fell to the TPLF forces. But now they're saying that there's this call by the international community and the Ethiopian government. Here it acknowledged for the first time that there is an entity called the Ethiopian government, the government of Ethiopia, it says on the letter. Previously they used to refer to it as Abiy Ahmed, the fascist leader, so on and so forth. But now they are admitting for the first time. And Ethiopians have been reacting en masse to this letter. They've been saying that, you know, the call by the TPLF for a kind of negotiated ceasefire is farce. It doesn't hold water, and that there's care is needed while sitting down, trying to sit down and talk with this group after all this looting, destruction. And if you can, if you may refer to the refugees, all those displaced people, the post-war trauma, the physical destruction on public properties, infrastructure, and all this. And now they are saying, let's sit down and talk. Maybe they're trying to protect Mekelle from falling into the Ethiopian army. That's what I guess this letter is all about.
Then once could be that. Obviously, you know, it's conceding a voice that you can obviously read from the letter. Let's also talk about the diaspora homecoming challenge. About, you know, calling for 1 million Ethiopian expats to come home come Christmas, Ethiopian Christmas. What new developments have you observed in this regard?
Okay, thank you again. So following the spread of the #NoMore movement across the globe, the government has called on the Ethiopian diaspora to come back home for the Ethiopian Christmas, which falls on the 7th of January next year. So it's estimated that about 1 million diaspora may make it back home by then. But the Addis Ababa Tourism Bureau has just hinted that the number may actually be bigger than 1 million, and that normal accommodation centers like hotels, restaurants, or spas, you know, apartments may not be sufficient to accommodate all those guests coming by that time. So the hint is that there may be a need to think up more alternatives of entertaining all those Ethiopians coming back home, following the call made by the government. And it has also disclosed, you know, actually encouraged the Ethiopians coming back home by that time to think of materials apart from cash assistance to people displaced in various Ethiopian towns and cities following the war against the TPLF. So disposable materials or handy materials are very much encouraged to help people rehabilitate. So that's the call has been made towards this endeavor. And it's also important to indicate that Ethiopians living in various parts of Europe and the US have already been donating money to displaced people, and actually been, you know, summoning up the strength to collect money and even disposable materials, supplies to the needy people.
The IDPs?
Yes, the IDPs. And also it has encouraged the diaspora to make it back home by that time. What matters now is solidarity. So let's fortify our solidarity, let's be together and speak volumes about Pan-Africanism, which has resurfaced thanks to this hashtag No More movement. And the Ethio Telecom, the state telecom giant, has just announced a 51% discount on all of its services as a gesture of its welcoming voice to the diaspora, making it back home by January.
Yeah, obviously this is also part of Ethiopia's usual warm, cordial hospitality, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, William, thank you so much for your ideas.
Okay, my pleasure.
Me and you, and I think to myself.
They may not necessarily have a lot of financial capital, but they have knowledge capital. Give them incentives to
They are playing an incredibly beautiful, strong, enthusiastic diplomatic role. They're fighting and they're winning.
It's become not only the issue of Ethiopia, it has become the issue of Pan-Africanism.
Welcome back. You're still watching Addis News Hour. Now, Ethiopia failed to make the best out of its rich and diversified resources of the diaspora communities in the past. The Ethio-Swedish Dr. Leo Desta made this remark in an interview with ETV. He has also called on the compatriots and the government of Ethiopia to stand together at such a critical time as this, when the East African nation is in the midst of various challenges. We have more on that. It goes without saying that the diaspora community's role in helping grow their home countries is extremely important. Ethiopian diaspora communities along the same line have been contributing share to the growth and prosperity of their home country. However, many agree that more could have been achieved in the past. The Ethio-Swedish Leo Desta agrees to this idea.
Yes, as you know, Ethiopia has a large and powerful diaspora across the globe. Sadly, to this day, this potential remains largely untapped. The last couple of months have shown us a glimpse of what this force can do if deployed and utilized properly. In addition to sending remittances, the diaspora has also become a true ambassador for their country by actively and tirelessly engaging in public diplomacy. The government must take the lead by putting in place the right policies and strategies to truly engage and make use of this formidable force. I would underscore the importance of doing it beyond a lip service and by genuine commitment.
He has also extended his message to fellow Ethiopians and the government to have strong solidarity in the midst of diversified challenges Ethiopia is grappling with.
Of course, my message to Ethiopians would be to stand vigilant, united, and firm in these difficult times. There is no force that will win us if we stand united. Truth shall in the end win over lies. Even in our days, David would win Goliath, as one of our former leaders did say several decades ago. There is so much unfairness in this war. This, however, will not happen without labor and sacrifice. Every citizen has an irreplaceable role and share in the process of taking Ethiopia out of this mess. And there is a duty of nation building, which is a continuous process. And it is a duty and responsibility of citizens to rebuild their own country. We need to keep in mind this. To the first ever democratically elected government, I have the following message. We all recognize the challenges of governing Ethiopia in these difficult times. At the same time, it's also a government that enjoys a popular support from the people. This opportunity shouldn't be taken for granted and needs to be handled with utmost sensitivity and care. The people have shown their resolve to defend their sovereignty and freedom by paying the ultimate price without hesitation. I have no doubt that Ethiopia would pass through these turbulent times victorious.
Leo also argues that Ethiopia should conduct inclusive national dialogue to help the nation come out of some of its issues.
We need a genuine and all-inclusive national dialogue in the end that would take us out of this situation, which I would say is man-made. This is a problem which we ourselves have caused. We need platforms that would allow us to undergo genuine collective remorse that would pave the way towards healing as a nation. This must be a priority task of the government.
Ethiopians across the globe are responding to the Great Homecoming Challenge, which will see 1 million expats back on the soil of the beloved country in the coming Ethiopian Christmas. Now, leaked Pentagon records show that the USA is responsible for the lives of over 1,300 civilians killed in its airstrikes in a number of countries. The report also reveals patterns of failure in deadly airstrikes in different parts of the world. The irony, however, is that the US still claims to be a global guardian of democracy and human rights. Tigist Sarnes has more from the New York Times.
A comprehensive review of all the available footage and reporting on the matter led us to a final conclusion that as many as 10 civilians were killed in the strike, including up to 7 children.
This is an example of Iran's bombardment of the US as admitted by General Kenneth McKenzie, commander of Kabul drone attack on August 29, 2021. The US has so far conducted a number of deadly airstrikes that missed their targets in a number of countries. A recent report by the New York Times on Saturday revealed hidden Pentagon records which reveal patterns of failure in deadly airstrikes. However, the report failed to include who to hold accountable for the deadly attacks committed on civilians living specifically across the Middle Eastern countries. Nevertheless, the US attacks even kill what they believe insurgents.
When people are labeled as insurgents, are they really insurgents? It seems to be the case that from the scenes in this video, that any person that is not a man and sometimes not a woman is by default labeled as an insurgent.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire!
The documents publicized by Pentagon revealed US's mistakes during the airstrike that took place in various Middle Eastern countries. Children were among the civilians whose lives were claimed by the faulty US airstrikes. For example, shortly before 3 a.m. on July 19, 2016, American Special Operation Force bombed what they believe were 3 ISS staging areas on the outskirts of Dakar, a riverside hamlet in northern Syria. Although the US reported 85 ISIS fighters killed, yet they hid houses far from the front line, where farmers, their families, and other local people sought a nighttime sanctuary from bombing and gunfire. More than 120 villagers were killed. In early 2017, in Iraq, an American warplane struck a dark-colored vehicle believed to be a car bomb, stopped at an intersection in the Wadi Hajja neighborhood of West Mosul. Actually, the car had been bearing not a bomb, but a man named Majib Mohammed Ahmed, his wife, and their 2 children, who were fleeing the fighting nearby. They and 3 other civilians were killed. The US has experienced the same erroneous airstrike that took the lives of hundreds of civilians in Somalia, Syria, Libya, and many other countries. With this context in mind, the US claims to be a global guardian of democracy and human rights.
America is grateful for a job well done.
The US also been intent in causing the same civilian killings in Ethiopia, while the rationale behind US intention is removal of Prime Minister Abiy's administration, which is democratically elected government.
Ethiopia's internal focus as an opportunity to take something, whether it be a military action or stronger political action, when Ethiopia is not credibly able to either continue operations or negotiation. Primary role for our command here is to be able to respond to crisis.
In spite of learning all these crimes committed against humanity, the international community refrained from condemning US's deadly attacks. the Westerners kept on inciting hatred and finding violence in a sovereign African country, using their mainstream media houses which are indifferent of the reality on the ground. And despite of all these silences from the global community, particularly the Westerners, Ethiopians and friends of Ethiopia across the globe are campaigning in support of the Ethiopian and African cause as well as that of those who receive the U.S. injustice.
The government and people of Israel have donated 14 tons of relief supplies to the people who have been displaced as a result of aggression of the terrorist TPLF. The supplies donated by Israel to IDPs include canes, wheelchairs, clothes, as well as medical and sanitation supplies. The support fosters long-standing relationship between the two countries and transforms fraternity and cooperation between the two peoples to a higher level, it was noted. Israeli ambassador to Ethiopia, Alelin Admasu, pledged commitment of his country to continuing assistance to Ethiopia in addressing challenges in the health and other social spheres.
And completely diverted into Ethiopia attacking the terrorist group. But the actual truth is the terrorist group TPLF is actually attacking Ethiopia.
ያው የአሜሪካ መንግስት እንዴት አህያ ከሚገል ጋር ከብት ከሚገል ጋር ሽማግሌ የታመመ ሽማግሌ መድኃኒት የማያድነው ሽማግሌ ከሚገል ጋር የአሜሪካ መንግስት እንዴት ይህ ሊረዳ ሊደግፍ ይችላል ነው ምለው ነው።
Now moving on, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen remarked that sound preparations are happening to celebrate Ethiopian Christmas in the historic town of Lalibela. The UNESCO-registered site was raided by the TPLF terrorist group and many atrocities were brutally committed until the joint Ethiopian forces freed the town. Johannes Fantaun has more on that.
The town of Lalibela has experienced atrocities and destructions as all of the towns and cities in which the terrorist group raided. Although the terrorist group wreaked havoc on the city, it's a miracle that the Ethiopian cultural heritage and religious center Lalibela is saved from destruction. Visiting the historic site, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen remarked sound preparations are now happening to celebrate Ethiopian Christmas in the historic town Lalibela.
Cruelty unprecedented in our history. After slaughtering the farmers' animals, the group used a hoe and a yoke to cook the beef. This shows the depths and the breeds of cruelty. The group plundered all the crops in the field and in the house. They dug out of the ground, planted potatoes in some areas. It is a crime to destroy the very essence of human life.
Demeke mentioned the ongoing #NoMore movement to open the eyes of the rest of the world to see this evil of the TPLF. He also called for strengthening unity of the government and the people for the vast reconstruction purpose.
The movement happening here in our land by the army and our people, particularly the special one in each corner of the globe by the people and friends of Ethiopia, makes Ethiopians very proud. It will allow the government to take more responsibility and pay any price. At this point, to pass this challenge and to break through with this campaign, we need to be more cooperative and extend our arms.
The call was made by Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister while he was visiting the Rohan monasteries and churches.
The government's communication service says Ethiopia and Turkey have agreed to bolster their ties in different areas. The State Minister Salamawit Kasa indicated that Third Turkey-Africa Summit was fruitful, realizing effective diplomatic activities to cement the vibrant Turkey-Africa relations. Habtamu Shagri has more on that.
The Third Turkey-Africa Summit was fruitful to solidify Turkey-Africa cooperation in various fields. Briefing journalists, the State Minister for Government Communication Service, Salamawit Kasa, said Turkey has shown keenness in supporting Africa's council to get fair and permanent representation at United Nations Security Council.
Turkey is ready to support and voicing African countries' concern to stand together and be self-sufficient nations. Thus, every African country needs to implement the concept of mutual benefit in relation to other nations. Moreover, Turkey is willing to work hard for Africa to get permanent seat at the international arena.
According to Salamawit, after delivering successful diplomacy in Turkey, the delegation led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed returned home safely.
Ethiopia has undertaken successful diplomatic activities with Turkey. Thus, the two countries are interested to work on education, security, health, among other fields. After delivering effective diplomatic activities, the delegation led by Premier Abiy is back home in Addis Ababa.
Apart from the recent law enforcement operation in the northern part of the country, the State Minister remarked the government of Ethiopia is undertaking irrigation development schemes in Ethiopia.
In 2020 and 2022 fiscal year, the government of Ethiopia allocated 9.8 billion birr to develop 17 irrigation schemes across the country. Of the total 12 irrigation schemes in the pipeline, 4 irrigation schemes are interrupted due to conflict across the country.
Information obtained from government communication services showing efforts are well underway to control economic burden due to the recent conflict in parts of the country.
Colorful Cape Town is one of the most multiracial cities in the world. The city sits on South Africa's Cape Peninsula, where the waters of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans converge, and spectacular mountains tumble towards the sea. For decades, Cape Town has been buffeted too by the crosswinds of social upheaval. But just like those early ships, Cape Town had endured some of history's most turbulent waters and set course to an optimistic future. Cape Town's central area is situated in the City Bowl. This amphitheater-shaped area begins at the edge of Table Bay and is backed by the iconic 2-mile-long plateau of Table Mountain. Post-apartheid South Africa is often called the Rainbow Nation, and like a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, diversity, transformation, and creativity shines out from the city's downtown streets, from its businesses, from its very walls. So come and savor the colors, hope, and freedom of Cape Town.
And finally, a number of African leaders gathered in Brussels on Sunday to prepare the European Union-African Union Summit in February. The delegation was greeted by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. Democratic Republic of Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi was present, as well as President Macky Sall from Senegal and Paul Kagame from Rwanda. The discussions centered on the preparations for the summit, expected outcomes, and the main themes and ideas to be addressed by the leaders, according to an EU official. A number of investments will also be announced by the end of the summit. And now a quick reminder of the top stories. Scholars push Africans to challenge UN systems with the spirit of Pan-Africanism. And diaspora urges compatriots and government to stand together at such a critical time. Well, that's all the news there is for now. Many thanks for watching us, and bye-bye.
Priscilla Rand has recently been elected as the vice chair of the Colorado Republican Party. She is also a proud first African Korean American elected to this statewide executive board. And I'm going to spend some time with her talking about American policy toward Africa and other current issues unfolding here in Ethiopia in this edition of Addis Dialogue. With it, I'm Shifara Olako, and do stay with us. Priscilla, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me.
It's my pleasure to be here to talk about such an important issue.
Absolutely. Now, you, as I said in my intro, you are African American. You're also Korean American with multilingual, multicultural background. Now, you are serving your country as the vice chair of the Colorado Republican Party. So I want to start off our discussion by asking your views about Biden's policy toward Africa. Many say that America's current policy on Africa is not only failing, but also pushing the USA out of the continent. What are some of your observations in this regard?
Well, some of my observations is that Africa has not been a high priority for the USA, and updates to our policies have to be sped up. It's been way too slow, in my opinion. We have a new administration that's less than a year old, and so there's an opportunity here for our policies towards Africa to be updated. We need to take a fresh look at our relationship with African countries because there are new challenges for us to consider. But the solution can't be for the US to dictate to Africa what your priorities should be. Most Africans reject infringement on their basic human rights, and they are concerned that America's approach to Africa is over-militarized. So Africans are capable of deciding what their priorities should be, and America must listen. And we can start by engaging more with Africa as a participant on the global stage, instead of viewing Africa like a charity or with a deficit mindset.
Ethiopians have recently rocked the whole world with their hashtag no more, urging the USA and some others following its lead to stop meddling in the internal affairs of the country. The movements have obviously helped echo Ethiopia's multi-layered burdens being imposed by some in the West, right?
Yeah, the objectives like democracy, independence, self-determination, peace and security, trade and investment, and overall development in Africa are critical. In order to pursue these objectives, there has to be a focus with effective solutions. This is not an easy problem to solve in regards to regime changes, but what needs to be respected and protected is your democratic election process.
All right. So now the other issue is global media platforms like Twitter, however, trying to silence the voices of Ethiopians, moving as far as blocking personal accounts. I'm sure you are familiar with such information. This is partly because of the infiltration of the TPLF in these platforms, many say. What is your take on that?
You know, it's always very difficult to speculate as to why someone's accounts are blocked because they have so much power. The social media platforms have power. I know this is a big issue in the US, as many people feel like their voices have been canceled simply because they have a viewpoint that is not a popular opinion. There are lawsuits against Twitter and other social media platforms in the United States for silencing free speech. In fairness, if you want to get your message out to the masses, everyone needs to be sure that they're not violating any policies with their posts. The conflict in Ethiopia is very serious, and people need to make sure that they are not guilty of crossing a line with what they're saying as they're simply telling the truth. So when social media platforms started deleting accounts, more conservative alternative platforms were created. There are other options out there to get information out, but one thing is for sure, you cannot block this movement that the Ethiopian people are engaged in.
Yeah, indeed. Priscilla, other African nations are also joining Ethiopian calls for justice, reiterating that Ethiopian battles are African battles. They're also saying this is a battle of growing trends of neo-colonialism, which the continent is sick and tired of. Do you personally agree to this move?
I can definitely sympathize with what I'm hearing from my friends in the Ethiopian community and what I'm hearing on social media from Ethiopians. I support Africans uniting and your desire for peace. Other than the days immediately after 9/11 here in America, I've never seen a country become more united and come together so quickly and so strong and so determined as I've seen the Ethiopian people. And your community has been amazing to come together with the hashtag No More. It's your God-given right to be left alone so that you can build your own country.
Now, a small handful of State Department cliques are being accused of undermining the democratically elected government in Ethiopia, clearly supporting the TPLF, which is creating havoc and terrorism among millions. I'm sure you're following the developments unfolding in Ethiopia. What are some of your observations in this regard?
Well, this is definitely some information that I have heard. I can appreciate that Ethiopians are very uneasy about what is happening. I would encourage Americans to contact their legislators and demand integrity and transparency from the State Department. I would also encourage Ethiopians to voice their grievance with the American embassy and lodge a complaint against any bad policies, but this is definitely an issue that should be investigated.
Okay, now also as an American and also as an African, and also, of course, as a Republican, do you personally believe that there are some State Department cliques that need to be held accountable for humanitarian crisis created in Ethiopia by funding and supporting a terrorist organization?
It's very challenging for me, being an American citizen, to verify what the involvement of the State Department has been with Ethiopia. I'm learning so much every day as I continue to have these conversations. I've heard rumors of relationships, but here's what I would say. There is such a thing as cause and effect. There are people who are accountable for the conflict and the crisis. There are an entire generation of Ethiopians who were young children when the conflict started, but now they have the burden of solving the crisis that they didn't start. I think the solution going forward must be clear and organized. Ethiopia just elected a new prime minister in a free and fair election. You must support and expect transparency and transparent relationships and trustworthy relationships with not just America, but with other countries. You know what is in the best interest of your people. So make your expectations known and use every peaceful and diplomatic tool that you can in order to build a strong government.
Okay. Let's also talk about the relationship between the United States of America and the continent of Africa. Many say the US will miss a historic opportunity to participate and build a mutually beneficial relationship between Africa and America. If it continues this tempo, what it is doing right now, what is your take on that?
Well, I share your concern. We're living in a generation where people all over the world are connected so quickly and so easily. You and I can have this conversation in real time, even though you're on the other side of the world. This means that we can connect, and the manifestation of humanitarianism is incredibly meaningful. So uniting with Ethiopians on your quest for peace, freedom, and self-determination should be easy for Americans. I would encourage Americans to reach out to their local Ethiopian American community and meet with them just to listen and learn. This would be the very first step that I would recommend.
Yeah. Also, just recently, the Biden administration lost diplomacy in Afghanistan. That costs the US more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money and the lives of many Americans, of course. Why is the government not learning from its mistakes?
Any concerns about America's involvement in other countries, especially in Africa, are warranted because the debacle that happened in Afghanistan. The way our government works is that the president is the commander-in-chief, and he is over the State Department and head of the military. So many people have been critical of how the Biden administration handled Afghanistan. One notable critic is Bob Gates, who is a former Secretary of Defense. And he said, I think Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. So we can't put all the blame on Biden because he was elected by the American citizens who knew his track record, but voted for him anyway. So the only way to change course is for the American people to express their disapproval to the legislatures and then vote for a different leadership in the next election.
Yeah. Okay. Let me come to you. And you are, as I said earlier, you're African, you're American, you're also Korean, you know. So there are diverse issues of minorities faced in the United States of America. What will your role be in the future as a Republican and also as an African to stand by minorities there, of course, which includes Ethiopians?
Well, the first thing we all need to acknowledge is that minorities in America are not a monolith. We have had problems in America with our approach to people of different ethnicities, to the point that the far left has hyper-focused on skin color and the social construct of race more than the individual and the person's content of character. A loud minority has taken over with the political correctness and efforts that have basically resegregated institutions and created more hate and more racism. I feel like we've gone back in time, and rather than actually progress with our humanity. We have created an America that has what we call the oppression Olympics, and people have manipulated race like it's a tool or a weapon. Okay, but with that being said, we do have groups who share cultural traditions. I consider myself to be a Frederick Douglass Republican. So Frederick Douglass was born a slave. He freed himself, taught himself to read, and then became the author of 4 autobiographies and the advisor to 5 Republican US presidents. And he valued the Constitution, and he valued life, and he talked about the right to bear arms and women's rights and educational choice and the ability to build prosperity. As an African American, I stand on these principles. So my role every day is to protect and pursue our God-given right to freedom and self-determination. I want to live in a world that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, where we can be judged on the content of our character and not the color of our skin, where we live in a world where little Black boys and Black girls can hold hands with little white girls and white boys as brothers and sisters. So I'd love to see a world where we are judged that way and where we can have peace and share our humanity with each other.
Indeed, Priscilla, thank you so much, and I wish you success in your career.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, dear viewers, with that, we come to the end of today's program, and many thanks for staying tuned so far. Until I see you next time with another program, it's goodbye from me, Shvara. Bye-bye.